attached to the monasteries and on the right-hand side of the bus, just past the chemist, you'll see a black lamp on the wall of the Cactus trading post. Look behind the lamp and you can see a small white cat. You see lots of these cats all over the city's buildings, originally put there as good luck charms in Victorian times. Later they became a trademark of local architect Tom Adams. These cats have become a feature all over the city. There are now around 22 to see. How many can you spot? On the right you can see some of the buildings have bricked up windows on the first floor. This comes from the Georgian window tax. In 1696 a law was passed on which owners were taxed on the number of windows their property had. To avoid paying this tax, windows were bricked up. These days when something's expensive you'll hear people say, "That's daylight robbery." It is possible that this saying comes from the old tax. You either paid up or lost your daylight, hence the daylight robbery. The tax was abolished in 1851. On the left, at the end of Gilly Gate, is the Salvation Army Citadel. It stands on the site where the St Giles Church used to stand. It's one of the very few churches in York we know very little about, possibly due to the fact that its graveyard was used to bury the bodies of victims of the plague in 1605. It may also have been used for burying the bodies of executed criminals until 1693. As we turn into Lord Mayor's Walk, look to the right. The tower on the corner of the wall is known as Robin Hood's Tower. The origin of the name is unclear, as Robin Hood has no association with York, the present. Behind the wall you can see York Minster, or to give it its proper title, the Cathedral and Metropolitical Church of St Peter in York. It's both a minster and a cathedral. It's a minster, which derives from the Latin monasterium, from where the local monks would go out from the monastery to teach or to minister. It's also a cathedral because it contains the throne of a bishop. This is taken from the Latin cathedra and means seat. In York's case, the seat of an archbishop. The present York Minster is the fifth church to be on this site. The first church was just a small wooden chapel put there in 627 AD for the baptism of King Edwin of Northumbria. Looking above the buildings on your right, you'll see the top of Monk Bar, which is the tallest of our gateways, standing at 63 feet, which is 19.2 metres in height. On the top stands life-size stone figures known as the Wild Men of York. As we turn the corner, look to your right to see Monk Bar. The stop here is for the Richard III Museum, which is housed inside the gateway. As we leave Monk Bar, look along the street to your right. Set back you can see the wonderful county hospital, built in 1850, which is now used as apartments. Keep looking to the right and you can see some older buildings on Monkgate, dating from the 17 and 1800s. Any earlier buildings on the street were destroyed in the Siege of York in 1644. On the left, by the blue road sign set back behind the railings, is a garden in the style of the Elizabethan knot garden, thought to be introduced as a selling feature for what was the design shop next door. If we were to follow the road ahead of us across the roundabout for about 10 miles, we'd come to Castle Howard, a stately home dating back to the 1700s. Castle Howard is where the period drama Brideshead Revisited was filmed, with its elegant house, beautiful gardens and lake. It's well worth a visit. We move into Foss Bank and run alongside York's second river, the Foss, on our left. It probably gets its name from the Latin word fossa, which means ditch or stream. There's no longer any commercial river traffic on the Foss, which was canalised in 1792. Today, both rivers are mainly used for pleasure boats and wildlife, with ducks and geese being common. In fact, the geese sometimes cause traffic problems, especially in spring, when they can be seen crossing over roads next to the river, with their chicks following behind. Looking to the right is Sainsbury's supermarket. In the 1980s, when this was being built, workmen unearthed hundreds of skeletons here. Work was stopped, and an investigation found this site to be the largest Jewish burial site outside of London, dating back to 1177. The chief rabbi was called in, the land was consecrated and declared sacred, and the bodies were left in peace. This area is known as Dewberry, which means Jewish borough or town. We turn onto Peastone Green, and on our right is St Cuthbert's Church. This is our nearest stop for the Quilt Museum. St Cuthbert's is mentioned in the Domesday Book of 1086, the book in which William the Conqueror lists all the properties and land he took over when he invaded, so he could tax the locals. Notice the church has two doors, a large door with a porch to the left-hand end and a smaller door to the right-hand end. If you look to the left, there is a 15th century timber framed house, now the Black Swan pub. Look above its doorway and another one of York's cats can be seen clinging on for dear life. The Black Swan claims to be one of the most haunted pubs in York, but to be fair, most pubs in York claim to be either the most haunted or the oldest. It does have some rather intriguing ghosts in there though. It has a grumpy old man who sits at the bar, but nobody ever buys him a drink. A young lady sits looking into the fire, but nobody ever sees her face. And a pair of legs which run around, bringing a whole new meaning to the phrase, getting legless in a pub. On the left is Hungate, an area of York that was once a slum area. After extensive archaeological investigations, this area has been redeveloped. This brings us into Stonebow. This is our nearest stop to the market, the city centre shops and the chocolate museum, and York's most famous street, the Shambles, the medieval cobbled street of the butchers. If you wish to go for a day out at the East Coast or Leeds for shopping, Stonebow is... Looking ahead, we can see the small church hall of St Crux. Just in front of St Crux, on the right, is York's shortest street with the longest name, Whitmar Watmar Gate. We think it gets its name from the Old Saxon, Whit-nar Wat-nar, meaning it's neither one thing or another. The street only has three properties, numbers 1, 1A, and 1.5. It never gets to 2. Just past the church hall of St Crux on the right is the Shambles, York's most photographed street. The Shambles probably gets its name from the old Danish word, fleshamels, the street of the butchers. The flesh was the meat, and the shambles was a large window ledge outside the shop where meat would be displayed. Every shop in the Shambles used to be a butcher's shop. The animals were brought into the backs of the shops and slaughtered. The blood, guts and entrails were just thrown into the gutter in front of the shops, where it would remain until somebody could be bothered to clean it up. It's why you'll hear children's bedrooms often referred to as a shambles, as they're dirty, disgusting places. the right and you may get a brief view along the street. At the far end you can see how the houses nearly touch at the top. It's said that two men can lean out of the window and shake hands across the street. If you heard the shout "Gardez-l'eau," you would very quickly get under the overhang of the buildings, as "Gardez-l'eau" means watch out for the water, and meant that the contents of somebody's chamber pot was about to be deposited on your head. We move into Coppergate. It gets its name not from the metal copper as you might think, but from cupra, the Norse for cup maker. It was when the new Coppergate shopping centre was being built in the late 1970s and early 80s that over 40,000 finds from a Viking settlement were unearthed, beautifully preserved by the silt and mud around here. What was found was so important that it even changed the way we teach about Vikings in the national school curriculum. Today you can see what was found in the York Viking Centre, where you can travel back in time over 1,000 years in York's history to experience the sights, the sounds and even the smells of Viking York. You can visit the Viking Centre from our next stop. We move into a relatively modern street, Clifford Street. On the right, the York Dungeon is housed in a grand old Victorian technical college. It tells the grisly side of York's history, recalling tales of torture and misery. We move into Tower Street, the site of the castle. This is your stop for the Castle Museum, Clifford's Tower, York Boat River Cruises, the York Viking Centre, York Dungeon, Fairfax House and St George's Field Coach and Car Park.